Hey, visionaries. This is Shalita, the nonprofit Easter O'Neill. And my vision is to help business owners and community organizers to launch and revitalize nonprofit organizations that will rebuild their communities. And we are back for another hashtag nonprofit no filter discussion live. Today, we're going to be talking about keeping your nonprofit compliant, legally compliant. I've had so many clients and nonprofit visionaries who have different questions around bylaws, around the proper way to structure their board, around memorandums of understanding, how to make sure that they don't lose their 501c3 status. So all of these different legal compliance questions. And I tell y'all all the time, I am not a nonprofit attorney, disclaimer, right? I feel at any point when you have legal questions, you need to reach out to a nonprofit attorney. So I said, well, let me go ahead and let me invite a nonprofit attorney who I know has been doing work in the community, who I've worked with. Her name is Kristine Dunkerton, Esquire, y'all. Hey, Kristine, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. We got a whole bunch of questions to ask you. And I'm also going to have it so those who are watching, if you have questions, put it in the comment box. I'll make sure that we ask Kristine. And I want to give a little bit more about Kristine. So as I said, Kristine is the Executive Director of Community Law Center here in Maryland. And she's been there for 20 years, right? 20 years of work. And has been firmly rooted in the desire to make all neighborhoods safe and healthy places to live, and all nonprofits effective, stable, and sustainable. Get it? She has created and edited several publications designed for Baltimore's neighborhoods and Maryland's nonprofit community, including Strengthening Baltimore's Neighborhoods, Legal Tools for Urban Agriculture in Baltimore City, a community association's guide to the development process in Baltimore City, and how to start and maintain a nonprofit in Maryland. So Kristine, I just gave a little bit about you. Tell us more about the Community Law Center and the work that you do with nonprofits in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. So Community Law Center, we are a nonprofit law firm, and we provide free legal services to small nonprofits, grassroots organizations, neighborhood-led groups in Baltimore City, as well as across the state of Maryland. And we are here to serve you as a nonprofit leader in whatever capacity you could use legal services in. Assuming you cannot afford market rate legal services, come to us. That's what we're here for.
Nice. And so people are going to be watching who aren't in Maryland, but what are some, can they still reach out, or is it just specifically to Maryland?
Sure. We only advise groups that are doing work in Maryland. So if you are established in another state but are doing work in Maryland, we may be able to help you. Other than that, we do provide general advice on our website. And please go ahead and visit www.communitylaw.org. And you may be able to find some information that is really helpful for your organization, even though it may not be tailored to your state. So I always recommend that if you're looking for specific legal advice, that you talk to an attorney who is barred in the state that you are incorporated in.
Absolutely. That was going to be my next question too. Like, okay, what's the disclaimer here for those who are watching? Yeah. Yes, it's general advice, but make sure you seek out your own attorney. And what if, because I know a lot of the nonprofit visionaries I work with, they may not have big budgets, and they're always they need, pro bono support or low bono support. How should they go about finding that?
Yeah. Go to our website. Again, it's www.communitylaw.org. And there are two things that you can do. Well, really three. So the first is look around on our website. You may be able to find something that helps you just in terms of handouts that we post there. We also do quick tip videos that are 10 minutes or less on a specific topic that is relevant to small nonprofits. So you may be able to find something there that's helpful. If you want to talk with an attorney, but you're not sure if you really want to engage an attorney for legal representation, you can sign up for brief legal advice on our website. So you can get an appointment with an attorney for up to 45 minutes to just talk through an issue or get quick advice about a direction to go in, or even just whether or not you should be engaging an attorney about a particular issue. So that's real easy. It's a simple Google form. Just click on it, fill it out, and we'll get back to you and schedule a time that's convenient for you. And then third is you can apply for legal services on our website. It's a form that we ask you to go through and fill out and send it in. There is a fee for that. It's an application fee based on your budget. It's a sliding scale, but we will not turn anybody away because they can't meet the threshold on that scale. So just talk to us and let us know what you can pay. Groups often will pass the hat and come up with an application fee that makes sense for them. We're here to serve you. We do not want paying the fee to be a barrier. And then we have staff attorneys who will work with you, and we also have about 605, I believe, right now, volunteer attorneys across the state that will match you with if you are looking for a specific type of expertise, or if you're in a part of Maryland where it makes sense for you to have an attorney who is local.
Awesome. So I've got a couple questions for you myself. So what are some of the typical nonprofit compliance barriers that new nonprofits experience? Like, what's some common regulations that they tend to overlook when they first get started?
Well, there are a few. One is, if you're going to get started as an organization with a formal legal entity, you're going to have to incorporate as an organization. And when you incorporate with the state, you become an entity that is then required to file paperwork every year to maintain your status with the state. It's called good standing with the state. And the forms that you have to fill out are personal property tax returns and an annual report. So a lot of groups think, well, I don't own any property, I don't need to fill this out, especially new groups getting started or all volunteer organizations. Problem is, if you don't fill that out, you will lose your corporate status. And a lot of groups don't even realize that they lost their corporate status and they keep moving forward. So one of the things that we always do when you come to us is we will check your corporate status for you, and you can do that on the state of Maryland's website. If you look at their charities section under the State Department of Assessments and Taxation, you'll see, or actually it's the business section, you can look up your name, you can look up Community Law Center, you can look up any entity and see what its status is. And it may say forfeited, which is the worst case scenario. It may also say pending, which means you might still have time to correct it. But we will check that for you when you come to us. And, it is more often than not a surprise to the group to learn that they lost their corporate status. So we may have to take a step back and fix that before we go forward with what you were planning on doing when you came to us in the first place. So that's the big one.
And is there a fee associated with the personal property tax for nonprofits?
Generally, no. It does depend on the personal property tax that you own, and you do have to report that to the state every year. You can apply for exemption, and hopefully you'll get it. Just because you're a 501c3 organization does not automatically mean that you're exempt under the state law. So you do have to apply for that. This is something we can help you with. And you can also make sure that your forms are filled out correctly by talking to an accountant. If you can't find an accountant that can work with you, I would highly suggest that you come to one of our workshops that we offer, like Bookkeeping 101, or how to maintain and understand your financial statements. We try to put a variety of different types of workshops out there that are not necessarily legal, but go right to what you need to do to maintain compliance.
Absolutely. And so, can you give some examples of what personal property would be? Like if you're a nonprofit and you, of course, you need to fill the form out, but what is that? Is it your computer? Is it your paper, your pens? What is it?
Yes. And that is, it's really a legal term that is not common sense. So there's a
Surprise, right?
right? There's a distinction between real property
Okay.
and personal property. So real property would mean real estate.
Okay.
And that's really not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is personal property, which is your paper, your pens, your computer, your desk, your rugs, your curtains, your conference room table, all that stuff, all that equipment in your office. It can also be if you do community gardening or farming. It could be, rakes, shovels, you name it, hoses, anything that you use, that you own, or that you lease in your organization could be considered personal property. And you have to have a value for that, unless, again, you are exempt, which hopefully we could, help you achieve.
Got it. Got it. So that means that a founder or a nonprofit executive should be keeping track of all the things that they purchase. Well, okay, so back it up. So what if because a lot of founders that I work with, they're coming out of their own money or using their own equipment in order to run their nonprofit. Does that still constitute, like, do they still have to report that as it being nonprofit property?
Yeah, it really depends on assuming that you're incorporated, and the property is being used by and for the organization, then it's personal property of the organization.
Okay.
There needs to be distinctions for money as well as for personal property as to what is the organization's and what is the staff or volunteers property, money.
Right.
All of that really needs to be clear. So having a good accounting system, even if it's just an Excel sheet when you get started, is really important to make sure you understand and everybody understands what the assets are of the organization.
Got you. Got you. Now tell us about this 990. So the 990N, the 990 traditional. What's going on with that?
Yeah, so this gets confusing, and you do need to file a 990 form each year. Even if you are not a 501c3, believe it or not, the IRS still wants you to file this, even if you're just incorporated in the state. So if you ever plan on becoming a 501c3, as soon as you're incorporated, you should start filing the 990s. Now, the good news is that if you do not have funds, if you have just a few $1,000s of funds, then you can file what's called the 990N. And it's not actually a physical piece of paper that you file. It's just going to the IRS website and saying that you exist and what your address is. That's really all that it is. The next step up is the 990EZ. Now, a lot of organizations never get to a 990EZ.
Right.
So just keep filing that 990N every year, and you're good. If you do decide that you want to file a 990EZ because you have reached threshold in annual revenues and it becomes, and you are a 501c3 organization, it's important for you to stay in compliance with your tax exemption. If you don't file it, you lose your tax exemption, and then that is an even bigger problem than losing your good standing with the state. Once you lose your tax exemption with the IRS, definitely come to us so we can help you try to get reinstated. If you have, again, sort of gotten to the next threshold and you have consistent funding for your organization and you have ongoing funding sources, then you're going to want to file a full 990 each year. Now, again, a lot of small nonprofits, the majority of small nonprofits never have to file a full 990. So, I wouldn't worry too much about that as a founder yet. But keep in mind that there are thresholds that you're going to have to meet. And every few years, the threshold numbers change. So, again, don't get too worried about it, but just know that it's annual compliance that you have to do to keep your status.
Absolutely. And what if there's a part, because I had someone ask on my YouTube to make sure that I asked this question,
Yeah.
was what if they haven't gotten to the point where they have been revoked because they haven't filed their 990s? Let's say they forgot to do the 990 or 990 postcard last year, or maybe the year before that, and they're trying to catch up. Like, what is the best way for them to get right with the state with that?
Yeah. So with the state, they can be a little less forgiving, but you can still go back and do your old personal property tax returns to keep in good standing with the state. You can, I believe you can still go online and print out the old versions and fill them out and send them in. The state is pretty quickly these days converting everything to an online filing system, but I don't think that they're there yet for past returns. Now the IRS, they will give you 3 years. So if you miss 3 years, it's an automatic revocation of 990s. So it doesn't matter if it's the 990, the 990EZ, or the 990N. If you miss it for 3 years, you are automatically revoked. The IRS will assume that you just don't exist anymore.
Okay.
So there is a way to, restore your status, but you really should talk to an attorney at that point. If you are pending your loss of status, get those 990s in as fast as you can to make sure that you can preserve it.
Awesome. And also for those who aren't in Maryland, when we're talking about going to the state, it's the same thing with every state has a charitable office or charitable registration office, someone that's responsible for incorporating nonprofits and businesses. Make sure that when we're talking about Maryland, it's the same for your state as well. Okay, well, enough about the 990s, unless somebody has a question about it. And I'll check in with the comments in a second and let you know who's looking, who's watching, and what they have to say. But another question that I get a lot is about a founder's clause in bylaws. So a lot of my clients are like, I don't want anybody to take over my nonprofit, and this is mine, and I don't want them to vote me out. And so I'm gonna put this clause in there. And I've even heard of an attorney saying that there's an Article 3 that no one knows where this article came from that said, so is it okay is there language that you can put in there that says that?
Okay, I love founders. I love their passion. I love their drive. But I think that there is a real misconception among founders that they can start a nonprofit as their own. And a nonprofit is not a dictatorship. A nonprofit is for the public good. So it's not about you as a founder. Once you get that incorporation, once you create that legal entity, you are basically giving up control to the public. So if you want to do that, you really need to think about how you're going to structure your organization. So in your articles of incorporation, you'll decide when you're first getting started if your organization is going to be just for a specific project, at which point it will end at a particular date when this project is over, or is it going to live in perpetuity? And most organizations get started with the intent of lasting in perpetuity, which means forever, and that their mission is going to go on and on and on. Now, I'm not a doctor, I'm a lawyer, but what I will tell you for sure is that you, founder, are not going to live in perpetuity. At some point, you are going to pass on. And the question is, does your organization die with you? And most organizations, most founders are not going to want that to happen. They're going to want their mission to continue past them. And you need to think about that from day one. How is this organization going to go on? Not that it should stay the same. Your organization should be continuously evolving over time. And you need to think about how that's going to happen and how that's going to happen with or without you at the helm. If you are doing the work and passionate about the work, there's no reason why you won't be continuing to lead that organization for many, many years. But there may be a time when you want to step back, or you need to step back, or you're just not able to do the work, not passionate about the work anymore, you don't feel like you are the best person to lead the group anymore, then you need to figure out, how is this going to transition to someone else who can really move the mission forward?
And that sort of leads us into the succession planning conversation. So what is succession planning, and is it something that new nonprofit founders have to even think about?
Absolutely, yes. Ideally, what you're thinking about when you start this organization is who is going to take over after you. So like I said, from day one, you really want to be thinking about this. You need to form a board of directors. And, when I say that a nonprofit belongs to the public, it means that there is a board of directors that are guiding this organization. They have legal and ethical duties to that organization, and you want to make sure that you are able to assemble a group of people who can really move that organization forward. So they should be helping you from the beginning decide what we're going to be doing, how we're going to be doing it, and how we evolve over time. And that evolution needs to include thoughts about leadership and who is going to be leading, and how are we going to keep getting new ideas, fresh board members who come with different perspectives. How do we know that we are serving our mission and our clients and not being part of the nonprofit industrial complex by serving ourselves and not the community? How do we get those people in that can really accomplish what we need to accomplish? And that can be everybody from people that you've grown up with and known your whole life, to really pushing yourself and finding people who are impacted by what you want to serve, as well as people who have expertise in things that you don't have expertise in. So finding that mix of folks that can really make you a success as a nonprofit is what you want to be thinking about again from when you start. Because if you don't, you can become stale and irrelevant really fast.
Hey, and that's the thing too. That's a word, because I noticed that there are a lot of nonprofit founders who are just concerned about the paperwork. I just want to, let me get this paperwork done. Oh, I'm a nonprofit. Now what? These are things that you should be thinking about if you're truly invested in having an impact in the community and uprooting or changing something that's not working. You have to think about these things up front and be okay with reaching out to other people that you can create as your tribe, I like to call it, so that they can have their perspectives, so that we can really change things. It's about the impact. It's not about, oh, I just did the paperwork. And
yeah,
that's
great.
So,
yeah.
Going back to so I know, look, a nonprofit is not a dictatorship. Let's say, we need to have some quotables here. Kristine, nonprofit is not a dictatorship. Okay. So for those of you that are like, this is mine, I want it to be mine, I'm going to do everything I can so that nobody can take it from me. But is there a way that, in a lesser way, is there a way that the founder can have voting rights on the board and still be the CEO or running the organization, but have a voting right on the board?
The founder, as long as they are not a paid employee, can have voting rights. Once you become compensated, you are not allowed to be on the board of directors with a vote. Okay. So, for example, I am the executive director of Community Law Center. I am on the board, but I have no voting rights. Okay. So I am there to tell the board about the day-to-day operations, to answer any questions that they may have about what the staff are doing, what the financials look like, all of that information. But at the end of the day, I can't vote. and their job is to supervise me. They're responsible for me.
Right. Right.
So if they are unhappy with me or how I'm running the organization or the staff, that is up to them to decide whether I should stay or go.
Right.
And that's, ideally, that's how your organization is going to run.
So what's the incentive then for being a founder or being, the ED and being on the board if you have no voting right or no say?
Yeah, right. Well, hopefully, if you are a founder and you do become an employee, and I also want to put in a little disclaimer there that most organizations, operate for years as all volunteer organizations before they ever get the staffing, the money to have staffing of any kind, even if it's just one person. I know we do see a lot of folks come through with the idea that as soon as I start this organization, there's just money out there to be had. That is not the case. Foundations are not waiting to give you money.
Right.
As a matter of fact, they'll generally want you to be operating for a few years to prove what you can do before they'll give you $1. So, you need to really figure out how to get your operating expenses covered through individual donors, through your tribe, as Shalita will tell you, by your board members. 100% of your board members should be contributing to your organization financially at whatever level makes sense for them. But yeah, you don't want to sort of assume that you're going to be getting paid.
Right.
But if you do get to that point and you are getting paid, you do need to step back and give up that other level of control and make sure that you help guide the board in the direction that the organization should be going, because you're there, you're the one with the boots on the ground, and they need to hear from you. So it's your duty then to communicate to the board what they need to know to be able to make good decisions for the board. And hopefully part of that good decision making is keeping you at the helm.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, well, let's check in with our comments. So we've got Beth. Hi, Beth. She said, so excited to see this. We're applying for articles of incorporation this week if we can get our name picked out. I have all faith you're going to get that name picked out and you're going to file. Keep us posted. Thanks.
Good luck.
And then we've got Lauren from Rwanda. Wow. She's joining in from Rwanda. What time is it there? Wow. She says, I lead a nonprofit language development NGO. Glad to join you. We're so glad that you're with us. Thank you. And make sure you ask us any questions that you have. I know it might be different, right? Because you're in a whole different country, right? As far as, how things are set up legally and things. But hopefully what we're discussing will still be helpful to you. And I have a question here, JB. So are you still considered a nonprofit if you only incorporate with the state and not file a 501c3?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. In Maryland, for example, you are filing as a non-stock corporation, and that means nonprofit in Maryland. It means that you do not have shareholders, but you are considered a legal entity that does not have shareholders, and you have a mission that you will set forth. So other states handle it differently. You might have a place like Washington, D.C., for example, has a whole nonprofit code where they have laws specifically for nonprofits. In Maryland, we have to finagle a little bit because we don't have specific laws for nonprofit structure. Everything is based on for-profits. So they have to be tweaked a little bit. It's a little more nuanced in Maryland, and every state is different.
Okay, so he wouldn't necessarily, or they wouldn't necessarily be, you can't be considered a because a 501c3 is a federal designation,
Correct.
Right? So even though they may be incorporated with the state, and also, let's say, would they be able to? Because I know you also have to apply to solicit in the state as well, which is something separate. Let's say they do that, and as long as they keep things in their state. are they recognized as a charity or nonprofit in the state?
Correct. Yes. And it depends on the state. In Maryland, for example, you do need to, if you're going to solicit funds, you need to file for your solicitation registration. There are lots and lots of forms that you that you file as a nonprofit, and I'm sure we'll only touch on a small number of them. And like I said, every state will be different, but you do need to make sure that you're following the rules. And if you don't, you can really get in trouble for that. So in Maryland, if you are, for example, we work with a lot of neighborhood-based organizations. And if you are a neighborhood association in Baltimore City that is working to improve your neighborhood, there may be no reason for you to ever file for 501c3. Because you're not looking for grants. You have dues, your members are paying you dues, and that's enough to move your programming forward. And that's where you can stop. You don't have to get a 501c3, but you may want to decide to incorporate in the state as a non-stock organization for liability protection, and also to give yourself that corporate structure and recognition. So it really depends on what you want to do, but honestly, you may not even decide to incorporate, and that's okay. You can be an unincorporated association and still do a lot of good work. It just depends on what level of liability protection you're looking for, really based on your programs and your activities, and what type of fundraising you're going to be doing.
Awesome. And JB has one more question around, they were approved in December of last year for the state nonprofit. Do they still have to file a 990?
You should probably file a 990N. I would suspect again, I can't give you advice without knowing the specifics of your organization, but you should go to the IRS website and you're going to have to register to file a 990N. It's a simple process through email, but it takes some time. And we have seen organizations who have started the 990N process, and things can get a little lost at the IRS, even somehow through their website. So if you have to register and you are not able to move forward in that process, do take the time to call the IRS. I know it sounds terrible, but you will want to do that and figure out what the problem is, because we've seen a number of groups who just get stuck because things are just not going through, and generally there is no good reason for that. And sometimes they'll just tell you, oh, you have to wait 6 months, and at some point you will get some information from us so you can complete the process. Other times it just goes through. So you want to be persistent. And that is also a test, I think, of a founder, is persistence. And the IRS will test that.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. And I have another question. So Nick says, is it possible to file your 501c3 without a board?
No. I would say no, generally. I'm sure there are exceptions, but no.
No. And I do, and also, so there's a distinction too. So when you're incorporating with the state may require a different number of incorporators. So you might be able to incorporate with one person, on the state level. But when you're trying to do your 501c3, then that's where the 3 to 5 comes in. You have to have, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Even if you're filing a 990EZ, they're going to, I'm sorry, I said 990EZ. I meant to say 1023EZ. When you file for 501c3 status, you'll either file the 1023EZ form or the full 1023 form. And if you're filing a 1023EZ form, you still have to supply or be ready to supply your bylaws and your articles of incorporation. And in your bylaws, it should have in there the number of directors, your maximum number, your minimum number, as well as which officers you have in your organization. And in some states, like Maryland, for example, you cannot have an organization where the president and the treasurer are the same person.
Mm-hmm.
So depending on where you are and what your state laws are, you have to pay attention to how your organization is structured and what positions people have.
Got it. And now that we're talking about the 1023-EZ and the traditional form, because I was going to ask you a question about that anyway. So what are your thoughts on the 1023-EZ versus the traditional? Like, is there any reason why grassroots organizations that are just starting up should not do a 1023-EZ? Or like, what are your thoughts around versus? It was like they're fighting each other. Which one? Which one?
Sure. Well, what I will say is there's a difference between what you should fill out and what you should actually file.
Okay.
I firmly believe that every new organization that's considering applying for 501c3 status should fill out the entire 1023 form. And the reason for that is because it's basically your business plan. Mm-hmm. And it asks you questions regarding what you're going to be doing over the next 4 years, who's going to do them, how much time you're going to spend on each of those activities, and what the planned results are of those activities. So it really forces you to think through, okay, how are we going to do this? And who is going to do this? Mm-hmm. I can't do all of this. Mm-hmm. And really coming up with this, 4-year plan basically for what you're going to do. And it also walks you through a lot of questions, a lot of very detailed questions that you should be able to answer if you are prepared to move forward with a 501c3 application with the 1023, either EZ or full form. Do you have policies for conflicts of interest? Mm-hmm. Do you have a whistleblower policy? These are things that you really need to think through, if you're ready to take that next step. Because if you don't have them and you're ready to move forward, the only reason for you to get your 501c3 status is to apply for funding from funders, and they're going to ask you all those questions. Yep. Mm-hmm. So, have all of your ducks in a row and make sure that you really know the answers to those. And if you don't, again, that's where lawyers are good. Mm-hmm. So, come to us and ask those questions. What is a conflict of interest policy? What should it look like? How does it make sense for my organization? How do we structure a whistleblower policy? All of these things. What are internal financial controls? And what does an internal financial control policy look like for us? You want to be able to function properly and ethically as an organization. Absolutely. So going through that whole process is worthwhile, and it will take you forever, and it should. If it doesn't, you're not doing it right.
Right. Or right, Kristine, you get yourself a nonprofit attorney, but then also a nonprofit coach, right? Because with my clients, I walk them through. They say, I want to start my nonprofit. We go through all of that. You need someone that can help walk you through your mission, your vision, your goals, your programming, how your measures of success, your budget, to help you think on strategy. Okay, once you are established, how are you going to move things forward? How do you collaborate with the community or set yourself up in a position to be able to collaborate? Like, you need to know all of these things. And before, like Kristine said, you're going to apply for 1023. But you said something, there was a distinction.
Yeah.
You said filing and completing are two different things. So
exactly.
You should complete the 1023, the traditional form that had the long form that has all those questions, because you need to know the answers to all those questions, and you need to have those documents that they're requiring. When it comes to filing, then it's okay to do the 1023 EZ, but you need to make sure, if you meet the there's an eligibility test and quiz that you have to take, to make sure that you're eligible. But most of the grassroots organizations I work with are eligible.
Correct.
But you need to have all these other things first.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Once you've filled out the full 1023 EZ and you feel ready and you've gone through the whole budgeting process over the next 4 years that Shalita mentioned, and you feel confident that your board is making decisions as a group and you can really move forward, at that point, you need to examine what is realistic in terms of what revenue we're going to be having over the coming years. And there's a real incentive, honestly, to be realistic, because it is cheaper to file the 1023-EZ form than it is to file the full 1023, right? And a whole lot quicker.
Yeah.
So, be realistic, go through the worksheet and, answer those questions honestly for the organization as an organization. There shouldn't be just one person working on this form. You need to be doing this as a group, and take your time to make those decisions and be thoughtful about your answers so that you are really ready. And if you feel like your group isn't ready to answer any of those questions, then you're probably not ready to apply for status yet.
There you go. Yeah. And there's another question too around that, which I've tried to do research and figure out what the answer to this question is, and it's cloudy. So if you are a 1020, if you file the 1023-EZ, right? And of course, for that, one of the requirements is you can't bring in more than $50,000 a year for 3 years, right? So for the next 3 years, you shouldn't be bringing in more than $50,000. Now, we're not psychics. And if you are doing what you need to do, or that you're really, passionate and you've got the right people in place, you will exceed $50,000. Is there a penalty if you file the 1023-EZ thinking that you wouldn't make more than $50,000 and then you do? What is the IRS going to do to you? Or do they even know yet?
Yeah, well, congratulations if you do.
Right.
But right, so you will file your 990s every year, and that's where the IRS will know how much money you brought in. I have never heard of there being a penalty sort of going back to the EZ form for that. It doesn't mean that there isn't one. I just honestly don't know the answer to that. But the IRS will look at your 990s every year and determine whether or not you should be paying them anything or not, and that's going to depend on your sources of revenue and whether it is, unrelated business income, which is something that you would be taxed on, or whether it was a foundation grant. And they'll also examine whether or not you're publicly supported. So, something that nonprofits need to keep in mind, again, from the beginning is, are you going to meet that public support test from the IRS each year when you file your 990? Which means, are you getting all of your money from one source, or are you getting them from a variety of sources? So you want to look at government grants and foundation grants and individual donors and corporate donors, and anywhere and everywhere you can get money from. Yep. You want to get that public support.
Diversify. And that's what I tell my clients. I'm like, we're going to figure out how we're going to come up with a sustainability plan, but you have to look at all those different pots of money, because I've learned the hard way in the past too, when all of your money comes from foundations and then they decide they want to do something different. What do? Right? So that's
dangerous.
So we have another question. So Daphne says, what do you do as a founder if the board isn't staying with the mission or vision?
Yeah, that's really challenging. So, again, you need to choose good board members to start with and make sure everybody is on the same page. And it's also important to do a strategic plan for your organization regularly, whether it is, every 3 years, every 5 years. You need to keep going back to what your mission and vision is as an organization and make sure everybody is on the same page. Whether it should stay static or not, is a question for that board, or whether it should keep evolving is something that the board's duty is to figure out. So, if it's diverging from the founder, assuming that they're either on the board or they're a paid employee, they need to have that conversation with the board and say, we're going off course here, or you're talking about something that's taking us, away from our mission. Is that what we really want to do as an organization? The answer might be yes. Or the answer might be, oh, I didn't realize that that's what was happening here. Because sometimes, you get board members in, everyone has a different perspective. People get their own passion projects, and they might think, oh, I'm going to take my passion project and sort of push it into this organization, even though it doesn't really fit. You need to have really frank and honest discussions with your board. And if you don't feel that your board is having those discussions, it's your job as the founder or the executive director to push them to have those hard conversations. Yeah.
Yeah. And even, like you were saying before, when we're talking about bylaws, that is like the religious text of your organization. Like that's your laws. And so you should be able to go and refer to your bylaws in different instances where if there's a board member or board members who aren't following the mission, well, what happens in those cases? Your bylaws should be able to inform you or give direction and guidance on how do you handle those situations. And it's also good too, because emotions like to come out into play when you're the founder and that's your baby, and things are going in a direction that you don't want them to go in, and everybody gets emotional and everything. But we take the emotion out of it sometimes and say, look at the bylaws. Let's refer back to what's in writing and what you agreed to. And if that's not in line, then there's repercussions for that.
Correct. And also, like your strategic plan, your bylaws should be a living document too. They're not something that you create when you get started and never look at again. They should grow as your organization grows. And honestly, as the laws change. In Maryland, we suggest at Community Law Center, we suggest that you revise your bylaws at least once every 5 years. So if you haven't done that, talk to us. We'd like to talk to you about it, because making sure that your bylaws are up to code, as well as working for the organization, they should really be reflecting how you are functioning as an organization, not how you functioned 10, 15 years ago, or even 3 months ago. Things can change fast. You want to make sure that they really serve your organization well and not just collect dust on a shelf.
Absolutely. And then we have another comment from Chris. So he says, "This is so informative. I'm glad that you feel that way, Chris. I'm informed too. Thanks, Kristine.
Happy to.
Bring her on the show. Ask her all the questions." So he said he's a newbie with the 990 form and just had his first fundraiser this June and needs clarity about the 990. You have less than $1,000. So I believe hopefully we answered the questions around 990, because he made this comment before we started getting into the 990s and the nitty gritty. But Is there anything that you would say to him, Kristine?
Yeah, I would just say, make sure you get your 990N filed. You're under the $5,000 threshold, so 990Ns are fine for that. You just need to keep letting the IRS know that you exist and how they can contact you. That's really all they need to know.
Okay. And then we have, and Lauren said again, yep, she's in Rwanda, and 16:30. So what's that minus 12? That's 6:30. I wonder if it's AM or PM.
That should be PM, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Not too bad.
Like, woo, but that is so awesome. Those are all around the world, international. That's right. So, but make sure you keep tuning in, Lauren, too, and don't feel any kind of way of reaching out to me. I'll put my information towards the end, so that if you do need someone to reach out to and talk to, and there's some things that are specific to your country and to your locality, and there's just some things when we talk about strategy and planning that's universal. So I would love to see how it could be supportive to you ongoing. And then let's see, we have all right. So Crystal, hey Crystal, is one of my clients. Hey, she says, is there a book you would recommend having to remain, how to remain in compliance?
As a matter of fact, I do have a book on communitylaw.org. We put out a manual called How to Start and Maintain a Nonprofit Organization. I think you'll find it really helpful. We do have a lot of sample forms in there, as well as quite a few sort of pieces of general advice that will help you decide what policies you should have in place in addition to your annual filings, and how to make decisions as a board and move forward. We are on the brink of releasing the newest version. There have actually been a lot of changes with the IRS in particular since we published the book last in 2016. So in the next 2-3 weeks, maybe, the new version is going to be out, and it's going to be a electronic version to start. We don't really see any strong desire to print it right now. But we're going to make it available electronically, so it will be up for download in the next couple of weeks. Check out our website at communitylaw.org, and we'll also be announcing it on our Facebook page, Community Law Center on Facebook.
Awesome. And Crystal's in Maryland. She's in Baltimore. So
wonderful. Oh, my favorite.
Crystal's amazing. She's doing work with foster care, aging out. So the work that I used to do, and it just, there was such a gap or a void. And now her organization, Resiliently You Community Resource Center, is stepping in to support young people aging out of foster care. So connection, y'all, connect.
Hi, Crystal. Let's talk more.
Yes. Okay, let's see what else do we have. So, Lauren's question, what an organization keep doing if they haven't any financial support yet, and when they have a low budget to run the mission on an everyday basis? So money's an issue, and what?
Yeah, we are fortunate at Community Law Center to work with a lot of amazing all-volunteer organizations, and it is incredible to me every day. And it is, I've been at Community Law Center. I started as an intern in 1997, and I was a staff attorney until 2005. And I've been executive director since 2005. And what really keeps me going and passionate are our clients. And knowing that most of them do all of their work outside of their work hours as volunteers makes me want to dedicate all of my time to helping them move their missions forward. And what they can do with little to no money and a lot of passion is incredible.
Yeah.
So, I would say, if you are trying to move a mission forward with little to no money, get those volunteers, find your tribe, find those people who are passionate about your mission as well, and do what you can. Your voices are important. So, getting them out there and showing yourself and getting involved is something that, can be even more impactful than if you were being paid to be there, or if you had funds to do what you might think you should do, but you're forced to be more creative because you don't have the money to do it. It can be really, really powerful. And I hope that you can find a way to move forward. I can tell you Community Law Center, for example, existed for 3 years before we even got our incorporation. And then we existed for 3 more years before we ever had a paid employee. So, you can keep moving your mission forward with dedicated folks.
Absolutely. And I appreciate all the time. It's about building your tribe and the emotional connection that feeds people. People are like, I'm not paying anyone, so how are people going to volunteer their time? You pay them with them being able to do something that really means a lot to them. And that is worth more than money. And so, a lot of times when we get out here and we start wanting to do the work, you have to slow down and make sure that you're clear about what the vision is, so that you can share it with other people so they can see themselves in it, so that you won't be trying to raise money or do everything by yourself. You'll have that tribe. I guess Kristine said that tribe to help you move forward. Okay, so let's try to get through. We have a couple more questions and then we have a few minutes. So Crystal had another question. How soon do you need to submit a change of address information for the state or the Fed level if you're in between securing locations?
Oh, you should do it as soon as you can. And there's 2 that you need to have on file with the state of Maryland. One is your principal office address. So that can be wherever you want information sent. If it's your house, it's your house. Whatever works for you, in whatever function, whatever structure your organization is in at the moment. if you don't change it, then your mail is going to go to your old address. But what's even more important, I think, for a lot of organizations is their resident agent address. So you have to make sure that your resident agent is always up to date. That cannot be a PO box. You really want to make sure that you have a person who's getting this mail and paying attention to it. So, if your resident agent information is old with the state, it's going to be going to whoever that person was when you set it up. And we see so many organizations get forfeited. We talked about forfeiture by the state early on. And a lot of that happens because the mail is getting sent to somebody who's not involved in the organization anymore, or to an address where it's just, sitting and piling up and not getting forwarded to the right address. So change it as soon as you have a place to send it to. If you're sending it to yourself at your house, so be it.
Just know that that's public information too. So your address will also be out there if you are listed as your registered agent. And I didn't know that before.
Yeah,
I'm like, why am I getting all this spam? And hell, but you can do it, right? It's just, having a heads up. Okay. Yeah. And so Daphne, just wanted to say thank you. This is a great forum, great information. I'm so glad, Daphne, that you found it helpful. Let's say, and also Akita, Kristine, you are answering all of her questions.
Hey.
Yes. And Charlotte says, great info. Thank you. Thank you all for watching. Y'all know we're going to do this every week, different topics for you all. And Crystal says she's going to follow up with you.
Oh, great. I'm excited.
Yeah, Crystal is awesome. She's just
wonderful.
And then Elizabeth says, if she started a nonprofit with 4 board members, can she add board members soon after she receives the nonprofit status?
Yes. So when you start a corporation in Maryland, you will say in your articles of incorporation who are the initial board of directors. But as soon as you file your articles of incorporation, your first board meeting is called your organizational meeting. And in that meeting, you will adopt your bylaws, you will make all kinds of decisions about where your bank account is going to be and everything else. But in that meeting, and from that time on, you can change who your board members are. So you just want to make sure that the number of board members that you have complies with your bylaws. And again, you can revise your bylaws at any time, as long as you're following what you say in your bylaws to do that. But if you have sort of a minimum number of 4 board members and a maximum number of 15, at any time, you can bring in board members that are within the, that 4 to 15 range. If you see that you want more or less, again, change your bylaws.
Awesome.
Yep. And I should also say too, if I haven't already, I really do encourage groups to bring in new board members every year. It's really important to have fresh voices and fresh perspectives and fresh energy. So you don't have to get rid of board members every year. But, if you do, it's a healthy thing. It's healthy to have organizations with board members that rotate in and out. So, don't feel bad about losing board members. Sometimes the best thing you can do is find new folks.
Mm-hmm. And keep it moving, right? Yep. No love lost.
Right.
And so it's
not a lifetime commitment.
No, and it shouldn't be.
Right.
Like you said, to keep it fresh and innovative and creative. So, and our last quick question, because it's a quick answer, is from Chris. So do you recommend board training since some haven't been on a board, and how much would you pay?
Yes. Is that a quick enough answer? Yes. Definitely. And there are a lot of places out there you can get board training. Community Law Center will also do a training for your board of directors. You can contact us. You can apply on our website. You could also ask us for brief advice so we can talk to you about it. But yes, absolutely. Your board should be trained. Everybody should be getting the same information, because everyone's going to hear it differently. And you want to make sure that you are all sort of on the same page and talking about the same issues with a same base of knowledge. Because you don't learn this in school, you don't learn this anywhere. So you have to seek it out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Kristine, for joining us and for sharing your expertise. As you can see from the comments, people have found it so very helpful and informative. And I know those who are going to be looking at the recording are going to think the same thing. And so thank you so much. I also want to make sure I put the website back up again. If you want to get in contact with Kristine, communitylaw.org, please reach out and look into all the resources that she has shared with us today. And next week, Tuesday, 12 p.m. Eastern, our next hashtag nonprofit no filter discussion will be with Dr. Alicia Nance. She's executive director of She Who Learns, and she's also been a community activist, racial justice advocate for over 20 years. And so we're going to be talking about developing more equitable and just organizations and community impact. There's been a lot going on in our community with unrest and protest. And if you are a community organizer or activist and you're wanting to channel that very profound and needed work and energy into the community and to change, whether it's your nonprofit organization, whether it's into someone else's nonprofit organization, or whether you are starting a nonprofit organization, you need to join us next week to have that conversation. It'll be specifically around strategic anti-racist practices and processes that address white supremacy culture in both white and BIPOC-led nonprofits. And Kristine is very familiar with this topic as well, because she was also a guest or panelist on the Visionaries of Color nonprofit summit that we had not too long ago, and where we talked about these things. So I hope you're able to join us next week. And y'all, if you're looking at this and if this was helpful to you, please make sure you subscribe. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. If you're on Facebook and looking at this, like my page and share it, y'all, because this is some really golden information that other people need to have as well. So until next time, be real, have fun, but get results. See you soon. Bye.